Hi, this is Henry Penix, the business fighter. I've had the privilege of coming to London to visit my friend Kevin Ritchie's, and he made mention of a gentleman who is arguably one of the most kind, famous, and mean, outspoken lord of this whole area. And this guy came from nothing, was on the streets. I'm going to get into that conversation with him, but he's been on the streets, has fought his way up, and he loves people. When I have somebody on my podcast, I want someone that is from the people and is there to do social good. This guy fits that bill perfectly. So I've spent a little time speaking with him, and I can't wait for you guys to meet him. Lord Bird, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Can we start by you telling me kind of how you got started, a little bit of your childhood, and then let's lead up to where you are today.
Yeah, well, I was born in a place called Notting Hill, and Notting Hill in London now is probably one of the most expensive parts. If you want to spend big bucks, you go to Notting Hill.
Uh-huh.
And of course they made that film about it. But I was born at a time when it had the highest infant mortality rate. So if you wanted to kill your kids, you moved to
Right.
if you had too many children, move to Notting Hill.
Right.
So I was there. My father was a building worker. My mother was a barmaid. They came together in the Second World War. Mm-hmm. She was from Ireland. He was a local working class geezer. Worked on the building site. So there was no money. There was no education. They were semi-literate. They had children they couldn't afford. They didn't pay the rent. They spent a lot of money on drink and cigarettes. Mm-hmm. So I was born just after the Second World War. I was the fourth. One died, so I was number 3. And then she had another 3. And it was poverty, but there was a sense of it also being self-imposed because they never used their money wisely.
Right.
What little they had, they didn't hang on to. So they weren't those really brilliant immigrants that we have in Britain. And I married one of them. I married a woman whose parents kept that money, mm-hmm. and they came from as much poverty as I did. So we were wastrels and didn't pay the rent. At the age of 5, I was homeless. Then we lived in a gap in my grandmother's attic. Became very ill. Went to another house that was condemned. Then was taken in by the Sisters of Charity because my family were Catholic, and the Church of England, the Roman Catholic Church, rescued us and put us in an orphanage where they beefed us up. We were there a couple of years, got strong again. Then they moved us. Then we moved to a place in Fulham on the King's Road, Chelsea. Near mm-hmm. the. And that, if I live anywhere and I leave it, it becomes posh after. It was very expensive. So I live there and I leave and it goes up. Moved to the King's Road, Chelsea, the world, it's gone up.
Right.
Anyway, and then started to get into trouble with the police. Shoplifting, housebreaking, fighting at school, not going to school, stealing cars, even I couldn't drive. Couldn't even reach the pedals, but we managed to take the brake off and roll it down the hill. So I was always in trouble, and I was always fighting. So the school hated me, because if somebody hit me, I'd hit them. And if a teacher tried to hit me with a cane, I would try and do it to them. So there was a lot of violence, a lot of corporal punishment, and I was a nutter. I was mad, and they kept putting me in these institutions. Which made me madder. So by the time I was 15, I hadn't been at school for half a year. The headmaster had told me to go, so I left. And I was a real screwball. And, daubing swastikas and, doing all sorts of stuff like that. Really screwed up child. It's very interesting when you look at the ingredients that were put into that boy to make him like that.
Right.
Because when you get out, you think, some clever arse. They almost prepared me. It was like making an omelette out of the wrong stuff, So you go,
right. This is going to taste terrible.
Yeah. And I was a really bad omelette. And then I had I had about 9 jobs in about 2 months. Kept getting. They asked me to leave because the cash till was always down when I was around.
You didn't steal, did you?
I wouldn't say that. I did develop a very large collection of Thelonious Monk and Miles Davis because for some reason, from about the age of 12, I was mad about modern jazz,
Right.
which I still keep in a passion for. But then I was put in an institution. I ran away from there, stole a car, smashed it up at 102 miles an hour. Was put in a boys' prison. And this was where it changed, because what they did was one of the screws, one of the wardens, recognised I couldn't read and write properly, so he helped me. So over a period of a few months, I learned to read and write.
In prison?
In prison, in a boys' prison, at the age of 16. So I was off. So I then became educated in a way that I had not. All my brothers were all they were incapable of it because they were still in the system. But when you did something wrong, they invested in you so that you didn't go out robbing old ladies.
Right.
So anyway, I got out of all that. Then I got a place at art school because I was drawing and painting. Then unfortunately, having left the institution, I fortunately met a young lady and we became a mother and father.
Yeah.
Very quickly.
Yeah.
And I then got back into trouble and stayed in and out of the trouble throughout my 60s, the 1960s. I wasn't dealing drugs, but I was running stuff and
Right.
getting into all sorts of
Right.
trouble.
Making money.
Yeah, and then I by my late 20s, I'd remarried. So my first wife got rid of me very quickly. So I wouldn't work, I wouldn't get out of bed.
And you had a child. How old were you, your first child?
I was 19 when I became a 19 when I became a father.
Okay.
She's now 53, so it's a long time ago.
Right.
She's older than me. I mean, that's difficult.
Right.
Anyway, so then I became a Marxist, and it got rid of all my racism. It got rid of all my hatred of people. And it's very strange because Marxism is not one of the nicest things on God's earth.
Right.
But it got me thinking, that there was maybe an alternative to being, an anti-Semitic, anti-black, whatever.
Everything.
Yeah. I mean, I really.
You tried them all.
I tried them all. And then I got rid of my Marxism, and here I was, having gone through all of this self-harm and being harmed. I've got to do something with this. So I started to write about it. And then I started to put plays on at the Edinburgh Festival and places like that about screwy people who get out of the sticky stuff.
Right.
Because I was convinced, and I still am convinced, I don't care what happens to you in life, except, if you are so injured that you can't even get out of bed or whatever. But the thing is, most of us, if we're able-bodied, it doesn't matter. We can turn the weaknesses that are imposed upon us by society or social wealth or whatever, or the damage done to previous generations. If we can look at that as an asset, then we can flip it.
Wow.
So I started
Strong.
to do all that kind of stuff. I became a very successful printer, ran a print company, and I worked for people like the Pan American Airways. I'm not responsible for their bankruptcy.
You charged way too much.
It was all my fault. But I got letters from the vice president of Pan American because I was in love with work. I was in love with printing, and I'd learned printing when I was banged up when I was in prison.
In prison. Wow.
So they believed in what you call redemption. They believed in rehabilitation.
Right.
When I was about 41, I saw on the television a guy who I'd known. He had a very big nose and a big bushy beard. He looked like Karl Marx, but he'd shaved it off and he still had the big nose. And I had a big nose.
Uh-huh.
So we both had kind of these big, horrible noses. And I recognised him because I'd met him. I knew him 20 years before when I was hiding from the police in Edinburgh. And lo and behold, here he was. He was now a multi-millionaire. So I thought, I'd better go and see it. You know?
Right.
Because you've got to have your principles, you know. When you meet people with money, you've got to stick to them and tell them exactly what they want to hear. If you ever want to bring about social change in the world, the first ingredient is money.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I made my way to him. He was in New York. He saw a street paper being sold in 1990 called Street News, and this very large black guy came up to him, and he thought he was going to threaten him, but he said, "Would you like to buy a copy of my street paper in Manhattan?" And the guy said, so Gordon said, "You know, how much is it?" He says, "It's $1." He said, "All right, how does it work?" He says, "I buy it for 50 cents, I sell it for $1." So Gordon said, "Why are you doing it?" He said, "Well, I'm 54, I come from Brownsville, where Tyson comes from. No one gets out of there without a criminal record or whatever. I was in and out of the penitentiary. If I go in again, I'll never see my children. So I've started to sell this paper as a homeless person. I've now got a room in a rooming house in Queens." And Gordon went, "God," I thought, this is about redemption from the very bottom rung of society.
Right.
He came back to the UK. He tried to get the charities. Him and his wife had started the Body Shop, and they got their charity, but they couldn't get anybody to buy into the idea. And then he came to me and he said, "Look, you've been a homeless guy, you've been a user, you've been a complete pain in the rear, you like the people you're going to be working with, and you have no sentimental commitment to the poor." And I said, "No, I'm not. I believe in giving them a chance. I don't give them a handout."
Right.
So out of that, we created what was called the Big Issue, but modeled on this American model. And that was 28 years ago. And then we spread it all over the world. We even spread it back to America. We spread it into the Far East. We spread it to South America. We've created about 74 street papers around the world.
Wow.
We've created an organization called the International Network of Street Papers. And wherever you see people who, to me, it's a crime prevention program. I meet somebody who, like, if they've got a drink problem or a drug problem, why not give them a legitimate way of making money?
Right.
So you can decriminalize them. In the same way as if you work in the city of London or Wall Street, you don't have to go and, you don't have to go and nearly murder somebody to feed your cocaine. You just ring up your dealer. And so therefore, why not give that right to people in poverty, so that if they've got a habit, get them off the crime, and then you can start looking at why they've got a habit, and you can help them, which is what we do. So we built this international movement. Also, when I was in America, I worked in the States. I worked in Los Angeles for about 2.5 years. I absolutely loved it. I think I was the only person in America who liked Los Angeles, because all was running it. Los Angeles!
Yeah.
Who wants to live there?
Right.
I loved it. A place of hidden shallows.
Yeah.
I loved it. I loved the fact I'd go to a party and meet somebody and they'd give me a big hug, and the next time I met them, they didn't even remember me. It was wonderful. You kept meeting the same people. Anyway, but no, I really loved it. I loved the fact you could have a meeting at 5 o'clock in the morning. I loved the fact that people were always looking for answers. I went all over the States, and the States is full of people who say, "All right, so what's the solution?" You come over here and people say, "What's the problem?" I say, no. Let's find the solution.
Wow.
Then we can find the problem. But everybody's telling you what can't be done.
Right.
Europe is full of people who will tell you, except in certain areas. You go to America and people will say, how can I sort that one out? There is something incredibly magic about the United States, and that's why I was there. And I came up with this idea called social brokers. I would meet people with a problem, I'd meet people with a solution, and I'd meet people with money. I thought, why not put them together?
You were the broker.
I was the broker, social brokers. And out of that, I came back, and then we got Nigel, who works with the Big Issue, works with me, and he ran with it. He's much more, I'm not about money. It's really weird. We started financial businesses, and we've got a number of them. We're a very large, I can't sit on the board, because I've got, even though I created it,
Right.
I'm an ex-offender. The Financial Services Committee, or whatever they call themselves,
They wouldn't allow it.
they wouldn't allow it, because
Wow.
they don't like people who've been naughty. I mean, that's unbelievable. Anyway, I mean, this was centuries ago.
Right.
But the thing was, gradually I realised that I was doing all these wonderful things, thinking outside the box. I was like a butterfly, beautiful. And then I thought, hang on, but why is it that most of the poverty that we handle, I was handling, actually flows through the exchequer of government? Why is it that they use social security for social insecurity? Why is it that they give social security to people, but they don't call it social opportunity? Why is it, and it's a class thing, why would you give children loans to go to university, well, it used to be grants, but now it's loans. Why would you give that money to them so they can climb out of the sticky stuff and aspire and have a full life? And yet it comes from the same pocket as social security. So it's social security by a different name. One is dynamic, so that you can use education and enter the middle classes and become socially mobile. And the other is placid and robs you of your sense of being and well-being.
Right.
Welfarism is so prevalent in Britain, and there are so many protectors of the poor, and all they want to do is give the poor a little bit more money, a little bit more money, a little bit, not get them out of poverty.
Not a real opportunity.
No. So I decided in 2013, I thought, I'm going to do something about this. I'm going to get into the box, because it's all right thinking outside the box, but actually the problems are starting within the box, because the box is not thinking. Governments are appalling. If a government ever gives you money to do something, it's normal. If you're in need, it's normally a means to just get you through the day, the week, the month, and the year. Mm-hmm. It's never a means of aspiring beyond. Right. I mean, there are some brilliant programs,
right,
especially in state programs, not necessarily federal government. Anyway, so I thought, wow. So I applied to be what's called a people's peer, created by Tony Blair, and there's about 200 of us. We're crossbenchers. We have no political affiliations. We can vote with who we want. And I applied for that, and after about 2 or 3 years, they accepted me. They accept a couple of people a year, and they have many, many people. But they chose me, and I know why they chose me, because they're nearly all posh, wonderful people. Or they're people but they wanted somebody who'd worked in poverty, and I was the guy. So I worked in poverty, and I'd done everything. I'd been a racist. I'd been in gangs. I'd done horrible stuff.
Right.
I'd taken drugs. And they wanted somebody who could turn that, like a prodigal son.
Right.
So I entered the House of Lords, and when they said to me, "What are you here for?" I said, "To dismantle poverty." That means I was a business response to a social crisis, not a kind of charitable response.
Right, I understand. Yep.
So to me, the world of the future has to be when our businesses are freed up to bring about social change. I mean, if you just look at all the big companies in Britain and in America, they are all providers of opportunity for children to go to university because they employ parents, small companies. So we have to see that if anything's going to happen, it has to be by encouraging the growth of a socially aware public business. Every one of us has a social echo. When I take my wallet out here and I remove this card and I start, these are my sponsors.
Yeah, right.
And I remove my card. Whatever I do, I go in here and I buy tea, coffee, buy breakfast and whatever. I'm enabling somebody to have a job, to have somewhere to live and all that stuff. So every transaction has a social echo. So I'm selling the idea of a social echo. And all these echoes, and what we've got to do is make these social echoes come together so that we can work through providing work, providing opportunity, providing products and services towards dismantling poverty. It will not be done by governments. So I went into the box to stop them wasting most of their tax money I am a beautiful example of what happens when you don't spend the money that you get from the taxpayer correctly. I have cost this country thousands. I mean, if it was now, it would be millions. But in my growth, I cost millions. I mean, in today's money. I was in an institution at the age of 16 that cost 3 times what it cost to put David Cameron and Boris Johnson in Eton. The average cost of producing the poorest person in Britain is about £1 million.
Wow.
What a waste of money.
Wow.
And actually, if you spent the money wisely at an earlier stage, like kindergartens and all that stuff, I mean, you put a child through kindergarten and you return them to their slum or whatever, the ghetto, that will still influence them.
Sure.
About 80% of people who have that early period education,
Right.
you can see the growth later. I don't believe in big government, but I don't believe in government of whatever size spending its money unwisely, and that means that's why I've gone into government. So I work with the government, I work with the opposition, and I work to try and dismantle poverty. And virtually every one of my colleagues is there to make the poor more comfortable.
Wow. That is so strong. So if I can summarize it a little bit, you grew up 5-6 years old, you were homeless, you were sick, you got put in a foster home, you were fattened up, you were made healthy, and as you extended your life, you got caught in stealing, running from the police, all of this and that. So you came from the people, you spent time with people who were in that sector, but then when you were in a boys' prison, as you said, you learned how to read and you learned how to write. So that gave you vision. That gave you a way. You learned something new. So now you equate literacy with some form of success or another.
Yeah.
Getting out of poverty. Literacy helps get out of poverty.
Social literacy.
Social literacy.
There is a big difference between literacy and literacy.
Okay.
Well, I would say that, wouldn't I?
Yeah.
Social literacy, what I have had from the moment I was born, and it was my Irish family, I had the ability to talk to people and actually fall in love with the common people. I felt very
connected,
privileged when the people I come from, roofers, road diggers, and I felt really with the working man, and I felt very much a part, and I still do. And so I had social literacy. I could talk, I could tell jokes, and I could perform. I got that from my family. So that has held me in. So being socially literate, but being illiterate, that means uneducated. I mean, I went to a Catholic school and we knew about Jesus's shoe size and what his favourite shampoo was, metaphorically. We learned everything about the church and all that stuff.
Right.
But nothing that you could ever get a job out of. And I only managed to get a job that wasn't a common job where you were shelf filling because I got literacy, which I got in prison. So I learned to read and write, and it made me the highly educated person I am today. I'm one of Britain's greatest thinkers. I really am. I mean, it is incredible. And it's because I ask dumb questions. I ask questions like, if you're going to have a referendum and everybody's going to vote for it, I think it was 10-1 voted for the referendum. But the terms and conditions of the referendum are a yes and no about such a big issue. And the people who make the referendum, they're so clumsy because they think they're going to win. And then, 3 years later, they haven't made a decision. So then you get all the political problems that we have. So what you've got is you've got highly intelligent, skilled thinkers creating a disaster for Britain. And these people are Oxford and Cambridge. So you must ask the question, or Cornell, or Harvard, you must ask the question, hang on, these people have got so much education that it's in a way, it's ridiculous. They've got all the right advantages, but they still can't think through, why are we going to pass this legislation?
Asking the wrong questions.
Yeah. Therefore, now we've got the situation where I believe that every person who voted for the referendum should fall on their swords. Metaphorically.
Right.
I believe...
Or maybe not.
Oh, maybe not, yeah.
I know you now.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to be polite. But the point is, why is it that education is sometimes a stumbling block? And I think one of the reasons is because you can be educated, but you don't necessarily think. I've started a new magazine called Chapter Culture, which I'm bringing to the States, and I've been asked to bring it. And it's the dumbest, most stupid magazine that's ever been published. And it's published in the City of London. Amongst all the financial institutions, they are supporters of ours. It's a dumb thing. It's a big magazine. I should have brought it with me. It's so dumb because it doesn't give you any advice. What it does is it puts together 50 chapters from 50 books, new books, old books, non-fiction books, and it gets you to open the magazine and go, ugh, rubbish. Ugh. Oh, that's interesting. So then, and it's not a storytelling, it's whetting your appetite. So you might read the book. So it's about getting people to read and think deeper and wider.
I see.
Because we're entering a world where our children entering schools at the age of 6 now, and you'll know this, by the time they get to 21, 60% of the jobs that they will get have yet to be invented. We are moving into a wonderful world.
Yep.
We're moving into a world where there will be enormous industries created around reversing the problems of the environment.
Mm-hmm.
There will be all sorts of, all the answers are there. I don't worry about the environment, not because I don't worry about the environment, but because I believe that we will come up with the industries. And I have been working with a group in the University of Cambridge who are looking at all the industries that you need to reverse climate damage. And I think that's the next revolution for us.
Right. Let me take 7 minutes.
Sure.
And I want to ask a few personal questions.
Sure.
So we got to chat just a little bit. We had a proper English breakfast, which was amazing, and I learned a few things about you that I want to talk about now.
Sure.
To finish the recap, though, you homeless at 5, man of the people, in prison, stealing, anything bad that you could do, you did. You tried them all. Then you got to a point where you wanted to reach out to somebody. You wanted to diminish poverty. You wanted to diminish illiteracy, social literacy, et cetera, et cetera. You became very successful. The big issue, my friend Kevin, who I'm over here with, he said probably everybody in England knows about Lord Bird. Like most people know of you.
Or what I've done.
Or what you've done. The big issue, the magazine, the street papers, ending homeless. You said something to me when we were talking earlier that stuck with me and I think will resonate with my listeners. You said every time that life has kicked me in the face, it's been a blessing.
Yeah.
Explain that very loud. I want to explain it loudly because I want people to hear you. Look at my listeners and tell them why, when life kicks you in the face, why is it a blessing?
It's a blessing. I'll just tell you with the broken nose. It's a blessing. I broke my nose 3 or 4 times.
In fights.
And I also being hit with a cricket bat.
Yeah.
Which was not very good news. And I've had my nose rebuilt. But because I had a bad broken nose, I met another guy with a bad broken nose and we became friends and he became a multi-millionaire. I told you the story. And so that went wrong. I couldn't read and write, but when I learnt to read and write at the age of 16, I was an evangelist. I believed very, very strongly that this was the most powerful weapon that you could use in dismantling poverty, because it was gradually dismantling my poverty. When my parents fought with each other, or when my father beat my mother up, I got the chance of becoming almost like a guardian angel of the weak when I protected my mother and defeated my father. So I turned you know, the kind of trailer trash that we were in. That's the way they used to
Talk to you,
describe
yeah.
us. They talked to us and all that stuff. When I learned to negotiate with bigger boys who wanted to bully me, and I normally negotiated with a brick in my hand.
Literally.
Literally, I would, because I would not be frightened by people who were bigger than me, because I was a weak little underclass boy. And I wouldn't, so I turned bullying into its opposite. I now work with people who are bullies, who are, they bully other people and all that, and I reduce their bullying by simply getting other people to bully them. So there's all sorts of ways in which you can turn a reversal. I don't accept that simply because all the cards are stacked against you, with some honourable exceptions. I don't accept that, and that if you can look at that as reality, okay, that's it, this isn't working, that's not working, I haven't got this, I haven't got that, so what am I going to do? There's always something to do. One of the things I did when I was very young was I saved a little bit of money. Unfortunately, my mother got hold of it and it turned out into 20 cigarettes, but I saved a little bit of money because I was trying to cling on to something that would change the place I was. I'm absolutely useless with money. That's why I've had to marry 3 times, because I've had to have other people look after my money. But the point, I wouldn't recommend that, by the way. But the point is, anybody who has had all of the reversals of fortune that I've had and come out, I think we all need to kind of pat each other on the back and say, okay, how can we get out? How can we move on? So I embrace failure. I love it when I've made a mistake and I recognize I've made a mistake. The worst thing is you get these people who've made tremendous mistakes. The British government, the British Parliament, both houses, the Lords and the Commons, they've made enormous mistakes. Their biggest mistake is they don't recognise they've made a mistake. So now we're living a political, social, cultural and economic disaster in the waiting because they don't recognise their mistake. Anyway.
Fantastic.
I hope I...
No, that's amazing. So when life gets you down, it shouldn't ever keep you down. There's always something else to reach for, and count those things that come against you as a blessing, and count them as rocket boosters that will latch onto you and take you to that next level. This is the perfect example. I've been so honored to spend time with Lord Bird, who came from poverty, fought social injustice, fought against the system, and has made it now to be a lord in the House of Lords, where he's representing a lord, yes, where he represents people, and it's been such an honor. Thank you. I know my listeners are going to get a lot out of this.
I hope so. Otherwise, I've just wasted all my time
30
with this
minutes.
American. Anyway, I had a drink last night, so my hands are a bit shaky. Don't drink before an interview. That's a good bit of advice.
Or the night before an interview.
Yeah.
But I want to thank you so much for spending the time and being so warm to me. Like I told you, I felt like I've known you forever already. So I appreciate that.
He looks a bit like my oldest son, that's why.
Yeah. Speaking of that, you're 72, 73?
73.
And you've got tell me the age of your children.
Well, in spite of appearances, I'm a very young father. So I got a 12-year-old.
Yeah.
God, she's gorgeous. She's wonderful. She's a fighter. And I got a 14-year-old boy who is just magnificent. What he's very good at is what his grandfather's got at, which was mending things. Can mend anything. Then I've got a 41-year-old daughter who makes films, married to an African-American Greek, living in Spain. Brilliant children. And then I've got a son, Paddy, who makes films for. He educates people into how making films, Sky and all the big guys. And then I've got another daughter who's a teacher in Scotland. I have 3 grandchildren. I have 2 godchildren, and I am blessed from morning till night with all. And it's wonderful. The only thing is, I wish there was more made of that concept of using failure as a beginning. I wanted to start a fund, and every person who applied for the fund would have to be an unmitigated business failure. Because I
Wow.
think if you can learn,
Sure.
can learn from that, it doesn't matter what you learn from, but if you can learn, oh yes, I did that wrong, I did that wrong. But the biggest, I reckon I'm here today because I'm really good at embracing my mistakes and embracing my failure.
I love that. Love that. So from homeless to Lord Bird, thank you so much for spending your time. And I truly feel like I've met a friend today.
Thank you. God
Thank
bless
you,
you.
sir. God bless you.